Hey guys, this is a guide to get everything you need for the Ratchet and Clank 2 Going Commando randomizer. This assumes you know nothing about Archipelago or randomizers. Or you don't have anything installed. So starts from scratch. All right. So the first thing you need is the to go here to the Archipelago RaC2 GitHub. This will be linked in the description. There is a setup guide here on the main page. So I will open up that. There's also a video here. I would recommend watching that too. This gives a very, very good guide. Um, so if you scroll down to the bottom of the setup guide, it does mention there's an Archipelago Discord, which I've clicked on this link and it says it's invalid. I've found other Archipelago Discord links. They're all invalid. If somebody needs to get into the Archipelago Discord, let me know. I can try to send you a link, like a personal invite link or whatever. But essentially, if you go to the Future Game Design channel and you find that and just search like Ratchet or Ratchet and Clank 2 or something, you should be able to find a thread under that channel that will have all the discussion related to this, and anytime there's an update or like bugs people find or questions, they will all can be answered right there. If anybody has just any questions as they're watching or when they're done or whatever, you can put them in the comments as well, and I can try to answer them or direct you in the right direction. But first thing, you need Archipelago. So that's linked here. Click that. This will open the Archipelago Discord. The current version is 5.1, as it says in the setup guide. You need at least version 5.0. But I've been using this, so I go down to setup Archipelago 5.1. I'm on Windows 10, so this is the version for me. It should be the same. It should work the same on Windows 11. But click yes there. Make sure you accept. Next. It'll save it there. Next. I don't need that. Next. Next. Install. Let's let that install, and then it will open up the launcher when that is done. Finish. Launch launcher. That's fine. So that pops up here. So what I usually do is I just go ahead and open browse files. So I have this open with all of the Archipelago files that I need and where I need to put stuff. I can close the launcher now. Go back to the setup guide. So now I need the latest version of the Ratchet and Clank 2 AP World. Click on that. That'll send you to the releases for the AP RaC2. The current version is 5.1. They do update this quite a bit, which is really nice because they're always working on it. So download RaC2.apworld. Double click on that. That should pop up and say install complete. If it doesn't, you might need to like right click or open up your downloads, right click on it and say like open with, and you'll have to go search into program data Archipelago and find your Archipelago launcher exe file in your directory. But it should automatically install it there. And what it'll do is if you go back to your Archipelago files and you go into custom worlds, there will be a RaC2.AP world. So every time there is an update to the randomizer, you'll need to go to the AP RaC2 here. You'll need to download the new RaC2.AP world, and you will reinstall the new one into the same custom worlds folder. And just to double check, make sure it always says RaC2.AP world. If it is named anything else, it will not work. Okay, and you also need to download simplified Ratchet and Clank 2 YAML. So it'll download here. Go ahead and just drag or copy and paste it into, make sure, okay, so I'm going to take this, put it into the players folder. So put that into players. So that is in here. I'm going to name this Alex. It doesn't really matter. The only thing you necessarily have to do is you have to make sure you know what it says here. Okay, it must have picked this up from a prior version. It usually will say like player, it'll say like player number or something that looks like this, something up here. Change this to whatever you want. Just make sure you know what it is, because this is the player name you'll have to enter later. All right. So then after you have that, go back to the setup guide. Make sure you set up your emulator. So we'll do that. PCSX2. To go here, you need at least version 1.7. The current version is 2.2, which works fine. So I'm going to download that. Open that. I use WinRAR right now. It doesn't really matter, just something that can extract the zip file. So what I have a I just have a folder here that's on my desktop under emulators, and I will just create a folder called emulator that I can just take all these, drag them into there. It will extract. Done with that. So now in here, now we have PCSX2. It is PCSX2-qt.exe. That's your emulator. So go ahead and we'll get that set up. So open that up. You'll need to go to Tools. Make sure Show Advanced Settings is checked. Mine already is because I've done this before. Then you'll go to System, Settings. Advanced will now be an option. Scroll down to Pine Settings, Enable. Make sure this is slot 28011. Then you can close that. Close that. And you should have everything you need there. And I'm going to go ahead and close this. All right, we don't need this anymore. We've already downloaded that in our Archipelago. So then the last thing you need, which I had in that folder, if you noticed, I had my Ratchet and Clank 2 game. So in this folder, I have Growing Commando USA version 1.01. Make sure it's this version. It'll be this SCUS 97268. It's got to be that version. That's the PS2 Black Label American version. That's the only one that works with the randomizer. So we did all that, setting up the YAML. So now we can generate the world. So if you open the Archipelago files, you can either run the Archipelago generate exe, or if you are open the launcher and you click generate, it runs the same thing. So generate, it will generate the seed, and then it'll dump the seed into output. So now you have this in output. What I usually do is I just go ahead and immediately extract it. This will create another folder you can open up. So now you have an Archipelago server, an AP RaC2, and a spoiler. Your spoiler is your log of everything in the game that is randomized, where everything is. You can use as a resource if you need it. But what you need to do is you'll need to set up the server, and you'll need to set up the game file. So the first thing you do is set up the server. You can host this locally, or you can host this on archipelago.gg. So the first thing I'll show you is how to host it locally, which in my opinion is the simplest way to do a solo randomized game. If you're going to try to do a multi-world with other players playing at the same time, I would recommend doing it on archipelago.gg. So I'll show a solo game, and then I'll show a multi-world after that. So what you do here is you'll need to right-click, open with, choose another app, and make sure you're opening this with Archipelago. If it's not showing up, you scroll down, look for another app, and then you'll need to go to mine saved in the same folder. So you go to Program Data, enter Archipelago, go down to Archipelago Launcher, double-click that. That will create the server. So it created a server. I'm going to hide my IP address, but that's what it'll show up as. So just keep that off to the side. Then what you will do is you'll, same with this, you will open with, make sure it's set to Archipelago. If you need to go find it, then you need to go look for it in the same spot. Make sure you use an Archipelago launcher. It will pop up and say first time setup, this may take some time. So then it'll open up a window that says select Ratchet and Clank 2 PS2 ISO file. You'll need to navigate to your folder where you saved the Going Commando 1.01 version ISO. So what it'll do is it'll take that version of the game and it will patch it for the randomized version. It does take some time, like it says, and then it'll pop up and should say that it is the game version is supported. If it does not say that, then obviously you need to find the correct version. All right, game version is supported. Creating new copy. So it will, what it will do is it will create a copied version of the ISO in the same folder. And then what you will need to do is you will open that ISO in PCSX2. All right. So it'll automatically open up the client here. It's a little smaller. Sometimes this can be a little bit laggy. Just keep that in mind. If you think it's unresponsive, just give it a few seconds. So what you'll need to do is in your server thing that we started up earlier, your server window, it will give you, it'll say like server listening on something something, and then it'll say, it'll give a port. The port should be 38281. That is the default. So what you can do here is remove this and just connect to localhost because you're on localhost and do 38281. Connect. It should connect and it knows I am player 1. Which should match the player name here, and which should match the player name you enter when you create the YAML. And I didn't change it, so what you do here, ISO, open with, choose another app, find your PCSX2 PS2 emulator. Then again, if it's not here, go more apps and you'll have to find where it's saved for you. Okay, and then this should say connected here. All right. So to make sure you know it's working, you should always load in to the Slim's Ship Shack first. That's where you'll load. You'll create a new game. If you don't load into the Ship Shack, that means most likely you're not running the patched ISO. You just chose to run the base game, not the randomized version of the game. And then once you load in here, it should start giving you coordinates to 3 planets. If you don't get any coordinates, that's usually some sort of connection issue with the server. So if you come here and you go into the ship and there's no coordinates, it doesn't give you any coordinates to fly to, I would try disconnecting your client here and closing it down and reopening the Ratchet and Clank client. And if that doesn't, and closing down the game, kind of restarting all that. If you need to reopen this client window, if you need to reconnect it, sometimes I've had issues with it just disconnecting. So sometimes just need to like reopen it. If you open the launcher, this Ratchet and Clank 2 client button will be here and you can reopen it there. But essentially that's everything you need to set up a game, and then you just go to your planet and go from there. If you want to set up a multi-world, I will show you how to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and close this, disconnect here, close this, close down my server, all that stuff. Okay, so if you want a multi-world, it's very similar, but essentially what you do, instead of, you have this one here. That is weird. It'd say Alex. I don't know why it said player one. Whatever. All right, so what you want to do, if you have a multi-world, basically you just want one YAML file for every person in your world. So if you're the one generating the seed, you will generate the seed for everybody in the multi-world. So let's say I have 2 other friends that I'm playing with. So what I can do is I can just copy this YAML and paste it here, and then I can rename it to, say, player 2. Or say somebody else already had a YAML file and they already filled it out and they just want to send it to me. Then I can just dump theirs in here. Same thing. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create 3 here. So I have 3 YAMLs. So I can go into each one, and so player 2, and I'll just, I'll name this player 2. Close that. And then player 3, make sure this says player 3. Save. Okay, so now I have 3 separate players. So I'm going to be the one generating this. So again, I can do it on the launcher, or I'm just going to use the generate. I'm going to use archipelago generate.exe. It will generate. I go to output. It created. So this is the old one. I'm just going to delete this. These are the old. So this is the new one. This is the one I just created. So I'm going to extract the files. Give me this folder. So now what I got to do. So now player 2 and player 3, they need the AP RaC2 files so that they can patch their own ISO. So I need to send this one to player 2 and this one to player 3, so I can just send that however I need to send that to them. And then I need to generate my own. So I'll go here, make sure I open this with Archipelago, and it will patch my own ISO for the multi-world. And then player 2 and player 3 will need to do the same. You send them the AP RaC2 files. They can save them theoretically wherever, but they need to make sure they save them somewhere, because wherever they save them, and they know where they saved it, it will generate the ISO file for them in the same folder. So they will also, of course, need to have Archipelago installed the same way. They will need, their PCSX2 set up, configured with the Pine settings enabled and all that stuff. So they could put it, in a folder with wherever they hold all that stuff. So again, ISO is created. It automatically gives me the Ratchet and Clank 2 client. And then, so now, because I'm going to host a multi-world, I'm actually going to host this on the Archipelago website. So I'm going to open my browser, go to archipelago.gg. Here. And if you need, there's also just guides in here. If you just need help with anything more general Archipelago, there are some helpful guides and FAQs here. But you'll go to get started, host a game, upload the file, and you'll need to find your Archipelago output folder, navigate to that, and you'll actually upload the zip file. So it will create the seed and create the room. So hit create new room. Now it lists the players. There's some good trackers on here actually that are pretty nice to have while you're playing through the game, and you can follow each person individually and see what exactly things they've checked, all that kind of stuff. I would dig around in there. But then it gives you, this is your server address right here. So you can either type in /connect in the command, or just, honestly, I just usually just copy that, open up your client, delete this, type that into the server, and hit connect. It will connect. Okay, and it says, because it created my ISO and everything already, it automatically put me in. So I'm going to, all I need to do now is saying ISO, open with PCSX2. Go ahead and select that. So now, same thing. It should load in, create a new file. It should send me this to the ship shack. And then if you look here in the server, it says, oh, now player Alex is connected and stuff. And then so once player 2 and player 3 have their APRaC2 files, they, once they run those through the launcher, it should give them the client. They'll need to open up the Ratchet client, connect to the same server, but they will, instead of using your name, obviously, they will put in player 2, player 3, or whatever their name is. And then they will connect on their own game and be on their own, own player within the multi-world. So again, create a new world.
Welcome back.
Make sure this loads me into the ship shack. Gives me 3 random planets. There we go. All right. Cool. So that worked. All right. So then theoretically, let's say, for example, I'm going to go ahead and disconnect from that. Let's say, for example, I am player 2 or whatever. Then all essentially I'm doing is I'm just repeating the same process. I just don't have to host the server or worry about the server. I'm just wherever I put this, I'm just gonna open this, make sure I open this with Archipelago. Again, player 2 needs all the Archipelago stuff set up ahead of time. Their version will create an ISO. And so they will create this on their own computer. And I guess I could technically close this. Because then usually when the ISO is fully patched, it will automatically open, there we go, open the client. And now that I'm connected as player 2, again, 57453. Whoops. Come on. Again, sometimes it's just kind of a bit slow. Connect. So it connected under player 2 there, you see, and it says player 2 is now connected. And so now if I run this one with PCSX2, it should load me back into Ship Shack, but have the planets that player 2 will have unlocked. So, make sure of that real quick. So that's how you would set up a multi-world. And I think I I think Archipelago can theoretically go up to like 30 players. I could be way wrong, but they can host
Welcome back
like
to
a
our
certain amount of players on one server on their website. And if you can also, and you can also do multi worlds with any game, so that runs an archipelago you can randomize with. I personally haven't done that. Okay, so player 2 got Uzla, Notak, and Felton. So if they go here, they'd have Uzla, Notak, and Felton. All right, so that's how you set up a multi-world. Um, I will say, if you want to, if you are setting up a solo world, not necessarily with other people, you can still use archipelago.gg and host the server just the exact same. You just, instead of having three AP RaC2 files, you just have your own. You just do it just like normal, but instead of hosting the server through this file here on your local machine, you're just hosting it on the Archipelago website just like this, and you'll have only one player, and that's fine. All right, if you want to set up an automatic tracker, there is one that was created through Poptracker. So these are links I'll put in the description. But what you're going to need is you'll need the Poptracker initially. So this is the releases. Go to the most recent one. When I'm on Windows, so I'll get this one. I will open that up. All right, so I'm going to save that here. I'm going to dump this folder here into my PCSX2 folder. So this is the Poptracker. That has everything you need for Poptracker, and the application is right there. But before we open that, you will need the RaC2 tracker hack for it. So just go ahead and download the zip, and what you can do is just take this zip file, dump it into the packs folder within Poptracker. Just the zip file is fine, you don't have to unzip it. Then you just open Poptracker, and it may not pop up automatically, but if you just load pack, hit map tracker, then it'll be right there. And then you hit AP, that's Archipelago, and then you will find your port and server address. So I'm on Archipelago GG 57453. Okay, and then it'll pop up this enter slot. So I'm at player 2 right now. So I hit OK. It will pop up this window with saying password. I don't have a password, so I can hit OK. And it'll even pop it up here saying Poptracker has joined. So this will give you a tracker. You can track all the items. You can see the planets. It kind of gives you, if you hover over the planets, it gives you a idea of what the checks are here. Red always means you can't get it. Green means you're able to get it. And then if it's grayed out, that means you've already gotten that check. And then the items and the planets, you can like manually unlock and lock them in the tracker just by left clicking to unlock, and then deselecting or locking them back up by right clicking. Same with the planets. And so if you don't want to automatically connect it, you can just do this all manually, which is fine. But that's how that is set up. There's also a broadcast view, just gives you a different window to kind of capture this if you want to do it for streaming or recording or anything like that. And this has a built-in updater, so anytime the Ratchet and Clank 2 pack updates for the Poptracker, it will give you a pop-up when you load up the Poptracker. It'll say, do you want to update? And you just click yes, and it'll automatically update. It works out pretty easily. So that's how that works. So that's everything you should need for this. Last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go kind of step by step through the YAML file. If some of it might not be super intuitive, and so I'm just going to hopefully give a little bit more description that might help. So in the Archipelago players, so in the YAML file, when yeah, when you're setting up the game, the first thing that you can change is progression balancing. Um, so in my experience, if you put this at 0 and you're in like a multi-world with other people, you're gonna have a lot more where you're getting stuck. You're gonna be like, well, I have like one check to do, and then I go to this planet, and you're kind of just stuck. You're not getting a whole lot, and so it's gonna be a lot of that, just kind of figuring out what to do, where to go. Um, you obviously you're not gonna be stuck forever. You're just gonna be spending a little more time waiting on people to give you gadgets that you need to keep going or get more checks or um but if you're on 99, the generation will give you a lot, would say simpler path to get the things that you need, so you always have gadgets that you're getting to keep getting more checks without having to kind of bounce around to planets and getting stuck and stuff like that. Accessibility, so this can be full or minimal. I've done this on minimal, and essentially what happened is I ended up beating the game with, like, I'd say about 2/3 of the gadgets, and the rest of them I just never got. I didn't need them to beat the game, and so the game never gave them to me. I never needed them to get through certain planets. There were some planets I just never unlocked before I beat the game, that kind of stuff. If it's on full, it's guaranteed that obviously you can skip some things, but it will ensure you are able to reach and acquire everything in the game. Deathlink I've not tried. It's obviously a like a whole it's a thing that can apply to any game. So if you're doing a multi-world with lots of different games, people can use Deathlink, and so if people die in other games, it makes you die and the other way around. Shuffle weapon vendors. This is either off or weapons. Do not set this to on. It will give you an error. It will not work. So make sure this is either off or weapons. So if it's off, nothing will be changed for as far as the weapon vendors go. So, because in the game, each planet, each vendor on the different planets will have like different weapons they unlock. Like on Indako, you unlock the turrets and the pulse rifle. If you have it off, it will always be the turrets and the pulse rifle you unlock when you go to Indako. And then the Gadgetron vendor on Barlow will have all the Gadgetron weapons. That kind of thing. If you set it to weapons, then the Gadgetron vendor on Barlow could have like 5 different weapons. And then when you go to Indako, there will still be 2 weapons that'll be unlocked at that vendor, but it'll be 2 different weapons. It will not change the like slots that are. So if you go to a planet that doesn't ever unlock a weapon, it won't suddenly unlock weapons. It only just swaps around the slots in a way. Skip Whoopash. So whenever you go to Maktar for the first time in any game, you always get stuck at a Whoopash Nebula ship mission. So if you set this to true, then you will never have to do that ship mission because it doesn't actually get you anything. Allow first person mode. Pretty self-explanatory. There's a new game plus challenge mode. You get first person mode. This just lets you have it right off the bat. The most important thing it lets you do is first person wrench climbing, which is double jump against the wall and spam your wrench. Then you can climb up any vertical surface. So that can be true or false. Enable bolt multiplier. If you set this to true, you get the bolt multiplier, which goes up to 20 times your bolts, like you get in New Game Plus, but you get it right off the bat. So you can set that to true. No revisit reward change. So every time you revisit a planet, typically in the game, all the bolts and experience you get goes down every time you revisit a planet. So that the first time you go, you get the most benefit. In a randomizer, you are kind of bouncing around a lot. So you're visiting a planet, doing a half the planet, going to another planet, coming back. So setting this to true will make sure that every time you go to a planet, you will get the most benefit from, get as far as bolts and experience go. No kill reward degradation is very similar. You can set this to true or false. So if you set this to true, every time you kill an enemy, you get kind of the max, I guess, in a way, bolts and experience, because every time you like kill an enemy over and over and over again, the amount of reward you get goes down every time. So this is nice to have on, just kind of helps you keep up with the bolts and experience that you need if you're kind of getting stuck on hard levels when you don't have a whole lot of weapons. Free challenge selection, so every time you go to a hover bike or spaceship section, you can select all the missions. So Gorn, Harugus, Feltzen, the races on Joba, the races on Barlow, if because like for instance, all the ship missions, you have to do the first mission to get to unlock something, and then you have to get to the fourth mission to do the ring challenge. Missions 2 and 3 are essentially pointless. They just give you bolts. So being able to skip those is kind of nice in a randomizer when you just get tired of doing them over and over and over again. So you can set this to true, and that is nice to have. The last two are multipliers, pretty self-explanatory. There's a nanotech multiplier and a weapon multiplier. So 100 is the base game. If you set it to 10, you're getting 10% of the experience you normally get in the base game. That sounds like torture, but if you want to do that, go for it. If you want to set it to 400, you get 4x the amount of experience, which lets you just upgrade things a lot quicker. Your health upgrades quicker. And so you're not worrying about being on like Grelbin, or some hard level with like no weapons and no health, and you're just screwed. You can at least kind of upgrade things pretty quickly. So that's nice to have. The things at the bottom, I haven't played around with a lot or at all. But you can kind of force certain items to be in certain places or that kind of stuff. But hopefully that helped. I know some of these are like, it's like, duh, that's exactly what, of course I know what that means. But I know some of them are just, if you're not typing them in or like exactly what the variable has to be, you'll get errors and you're like, I don't know why this is an error, and just like it's because you mistyped a letter, or like again, the weapons, you set it to on instead of weapons, or you didn't put a space, or something weird can happen. Just make sure that you're typing these in exactly correct and saving them. And I will reiterate, I've had issues where when I go to the custom worlds and my RaC2 AP world file is slightly named, like I'll copy it in and then it'll be like, oh, this is already one here, so it'll put a 2 here. And then I go to set up the YAML, I go to generate, and it'll tell me the YAML has an error, when actually, in fact, it's the RaC2 AP world file. So make sure this always says rac2.apworld. So in my understanding, that's why that was happening. But so that should be everything. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to put it in the comments